Once again, if I did not call your name, please stay on afterwards, and I'll get you in. You guys see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, perfect. So what we're going to talk about today is squat. The reason we want to talk about it is because it's a movement that needs to be done all the time, just in real life and also in performance. But there's a lot of misconceptions and fallacies out there that we just want to clear off. So, very important movement that we want to make sure that we're getting the full understanding. Hey, could you guys go on mute real quick? Thank you. All right, so today what we're going to talk about is the squat. It's a very complex movement, so there's a ton of different things going on when we squat that we want to pay attention to. But I'm just going to go over the important concepts of it, okay? Because we could literally have an hour and a half presentation just on squat. So when we're talking about it, we're going to give you a good overview, the fundamentals of it, and then also some common issues you might see with clients. So why do we squat? One thing is that there's over 200 muscles activated when we do it. So it's a huge bang for your buck exercise, and it's very applicable to all kinds of different athletes or general population. So it's a king of all exercises, highly functional if you're looking at general population to elite athletes. So as far as general population, think about just picking up the groceries and are getting out of a chair, okay? So some people are okay moving around, but they can't even get out of a chair. So we want to make sure that their movement is highly functional and they're operating at a high level. Also, if they're an athlete, there's a direct correlation with the research to performance benefits. So as far as athletes go, it's important for them to squat as well. So biggest thing, it's a fundamental human movement. So we have it from basically as soon as we learn to talk or walk. And babies do it all the time. You see it all the time when babies squat down. They have a perfect squat, but we lose it as we age. The other thing with squat is that it represents a great point of intervention for different lifestyle issues. So squatting is done as a screening process too to find out where these imbalances are, where there's the mobility issues, things like that. So squat's a very great foundation for a lot of different things. So one second here. Sorry, there we go. I don't know if you guys can see that, but I keep getting a notification. One of the important movements, and it's the most complex, so it's a natural position. Like I said, all toddlers can do, but the non-Western countries typically keep it. But the Western countries, we lose it because we sit in a chair all day, and our posterior chains are compromised when we do that. When we're looking at improving ability, just as far as general populations go, it'll help better with their day-to-day movements, but also maintain their mobility as they age. So it's important that we get everyone squatting properly. And the posterior chain is often the first thing to go as we age. For a few reasons. One, because we sit all day in the chairs, but most adults don't typically target posterior when they train, right? So if they don't have a professional like you training them, you always see them doing very quad dominant movements, and they're already strong in the quad, but very weak in the posterior. So the perfect example is this: is people have getting trouble out of a chair, but they can walk just fine, which is a very quad dominant exercise. So that's one example of why the posterior needs to be targeted, and that squat position needs to be learned. This also leads to poor walking mechanics, and they're more prone to falls if they can't function properly in a squat. So as far as benefits go, a lot of times when people hear a squat, they automatically think strength, but there's way more benefits to this movement than just strength. One of them is better functional mobility and also walking speed. So even when you're older clients like 60s, 70s, they're going to be able to be more efficient movers just by squatting better. Also, greater bone mineral density. So this means to them that they have less chance of breaking bones, okay? Because sometimes when you say this stuff to clients, it goes right over their head. So dumb it down for them. Talk to them about why it matters. Also, a stronger core. Prevention of pain and injury is what you can talk to them about. Performance, obviously, when you're looking at, faster running, higher vertical strength and power output, those are things that athletes you can talk about. So as far as fallacies goes, there's a lot of them when it comes to squats. So I want to help everyone clear it up a little bit. So squats are for everyone, just not for athletes. A lot of times the older population think a back squat is just only good for athletes, which is absolutely not true. They're not safe for the back and knees. You hear people saying that all the time. That's not true. The thing with that, poor mechanics are bad for knees and back, but squats are not. Okay, so if you perform a squat correctly, it's actually highly beneficial. Perfect form is upright position. So you hear a lot of people talking about the perfect squat. There's no such thing, and I'll tell you why. There's two different versions of how we should squat. The knees can't go past the toes. I'm going to talk about this too. That's absolutely false. Knees definitely can go past the toes. We just got to make sure the heels are on the floor or at least planted on a surface when we do it. And I'm going to talk about the technicalities of that. Also, you hear out there it's the best exercise for glute development. If you guys attended my glute activation webinar, you know that's absolutely false. So there's a lot of fallacies out there in social media about the she must squat stuff that's out there. It's not true. Stunts growth in kids, you probably hear that a lot too. That's actually false. It actually improves their bone mineral density and growth. So obviously when we're talking about kids, we're not going to extremely overload them with weights and high load. Obviously you want to get movement down first, then apply a small load, and then as they age you can start applying more load. So definitely safe for kids to do as well. So who can squat? Obviously athletes, that's going to be a big part of the population that does it because of the performance benefits. Youth, they can start as young as 7 or 8 years of age, learning the movement and getting it down, and then we apply load. General population, middle-aged seniors, because of its functionality. Bottom line, as far as squat goes, almost anybody and everyone should be doing it, except for the people that have some serious issues as far as medical issues going on, maybe with the knees or back, things like that. But when I'm talking about the information today, we're talking about overall healthy individuals, the ones that can be working with you. So common trainer mistakes that we might hear and see. Not letting the knees go past the toe after hip hinge, okay? So everyone's correct. You don't want to lead with the knees. You want to lead with the hip and then let the knees trace past. So when we hear that old saying of not letting knees go past toes, I'm going to give you the details on that on the next slide here, coming up here soon. Talking about the perfect squat, kind of saw this the other day on social media. It drove me nuts. It was this Insta-famous chick. I say Insta-famous because they're not really famous. They're only famous on Instagram. And she took a picture of herself squatting. She called it the perfect squat, which there's no such thing. And the funny thing is that she was in a horrible overarched position in her squat, and it looked absolutely horrible to my eye. So as far as perfect squat goes, there's not a perfect squat, and I'll tell you why. Applying load too soon. See that a lot too, right? People get anxious to put the load on just because they want to look good in the gym, but they don't even have even close to full range of motion. So I always work on getting closer to full range of motion first and then apply load. You also have a lot of old school power lifters talking about toes out, heads up to general population clients. When it comes to the toes, there's a huge difference between performance and training for population. So when it comes to this, toes out are going to be absolutely okay if you're focused on just moving as much weight as possible. Because what it's going to do, it's going to allow you more mobility, and it's easier for you to get down lower if the toes are out a little bit. Now, you don't want to go past 30 degrees when you do that, okay? Now, when it comes to clientele, we want to make them more functional. So we actually want them to work on getting their feet more straight when they squat. So we want their toes more straight ahead when they squat. One, requires more stability in core, but two, it's more functional, right? So we don't want these muscle imbalances to continue to happen, because what happens is usually when people are trying to get the squat down, you'll see their toes rotate out. And that's typically a muscle imbalance or mobility issue. So what we want to do is correct that, so over time their toes are more straight when they squat. Okay, so big difference there. You can go either way. So biggest thing with that is don't force your clients to make the toes straight. They eventually work their way towards it naturally just by fixing issues. Okay, so basic mechanics. Let's kind of go over what we should kind of be looking at here. So bottom line, that bar, when you see those dotted lines on that graph there, that's where the bar should lead, straight up, straight down. So we shouldn't see any variance in that when we do a squat properly. You can also see the toes are well over the knees are well over the toes in these movements, okay? So let's talk about basic steps. We can kind of address this, okay? First talk about foot placement. Get them in a comfortable position. Then teach them hip hinge, okay? Because that's a movement that's kind of difficult if you have never done it before. So they need to learn how to shoot their hips back, okay? Then at the same time, you allow your knees to bend forward, okay? So a lot of times when people start squatting, they lead with the knee, and then they go in the hip eventually. You want the opposite, hip, then knee. Keeping the back straight and knees pointed in the same direction as the feet, okay? So keep them in line. And then we descend until they get to a position that they can actually do. Over time, you can work on range of motion. So if they can only get to a certain point, that's fine, just work on it. So, because there's obviously going to be an issue of muscle issues as far as balance goes or strength and also mobility issues. So over time, they should be able to get to a full range of motion. And then we obviously want to extend back up and return and repeat, okay? So when it comes to knees past toes, as you can see this lifter right here, well past the toes, but it's a completely safe position. So the reason you might have heard this before is it's old research, way back from the 70s, talking about, you know, really bad tension on the knee and stress on it, claiming it unsafe. But we know now 100% that's absolutely false. As long as you have good mechanics, you actually need the knee to go past the toe if you want to get into a full squat, okay? So your tendons and ligaments and menisci actually easily tolerate this force placed on them in the deep squat, okay? In fact, with healthy knees, they'll actually adapt and get stronger in response to this training. So you're actually making your clients more healthy by getting them into a more of a full squat, otherwise known as a deep squat. When it comes to pre-existing knee pain, so some of your clients might have knee issues. Probably a lot of them do, right? They complain of knee pain. Well, one, obviously, we know that's probably a muscle imbalance issue that we want to fix. And also could be mobility. So typically, if they have pre-existing knee pain, it's typically fine. But if they're getting pain when they their knees track farther past their toes, but they don't when they sit back into a squat, then obviously don't do it, okay? Just wait until they fix their issues, and then we can eventually allow them to do that, okay? So just let them go until they're comfortable. If they feel a sharp, bad pain, then don't do it, okay? Because this is typically going to come from a muscle imbalance issue that can be corrected, and then over time, we can actually get them into a deeper squat, okay? There's going to be some population, though, that absolutely cannot do it. It's a small percentage, but it's the people that have serious medical issues or had some serious surgeries taking place with the back or either the knees. So there's a special population that might not be able to do it, but overall, your client should eventually be able to. So when it comes to that perfect squat we talked about and why there's no such thing, these are actually two different versions of squat that are 100% acceptable and accurate, okay? The reason for that is we know in the research now that a lot of your femur length is really going to vary how your mechanics look relative to your torso, okay? So there's going to be two positions you're going to want to look at, okay? You're going to get a greater lean if your femur length is more than your torso length. So for a more upright squatting posture, what people would dub as perfect squat when they're not, you know, into the research and know what's going on, the reason this happens is they have a shorter femur length and longer torso length, okay? They also probably have greater ankle mobility, also known as dorsiflexion. There's other outside human factors that could affect this, okay? Elevating the heel or a lifting shoe, a wider stance, or even a high bar position. Now, these outside human aspects are not 100% like this is how it is written in law, but these are just different things that can adjust their mechanics to be more upright, okay? So, for example, I do, this says high bar here, but I actually do a low bar position, and I go down into a full Olympic squat. When I do that, I would technically be called the bottom position because of my bar, but that's not true. So that's just an example of these are different variations that could occur, but they're not 100% that direction. When it comes to femur length and torso, I would say yes. So for more of a forward lean squatting posture, they're going to have some restricted ankle mobility and longer relative femur length to their torso. So outside human factors that would affect this, no elevation or flat shoes if they had poor mobility, a low bar position, but like I said, that's not always true, and then of a more narrow stance, which is not always true either, okay? So overall, just know it's really based on your genetics and your femur length over your torso length, okay? So that's really going to affect how your squat looks, and both of these are 100% fine and good, okay? So let's talk about depth, okay? Some people think it's bad to go past parallel. Not true at all, okay? Studies are showing that full depth squats are more beneficial than partial depth in multiple areas, okay? Now, this doesn't mean that partial squat training isn't appropriate at times. So, for example, if you have an elite athlete that has to bust through a strength curve issue, then there's a time and a place to do partial squats. That's more like elite strength athletes. So what we want to look at is general population. We really want them to get more into a deep full squat with proper mobility and strength training. So as far as safety goes, actually everything, the forces placed on the knees are actually reduced when we get to a full depth squat, so it's actually better. And you also get better stability and greater tolerance of load when we get into a full squat. So there's numerous reasons why we should be shifting away from that partial squat to a full depth squat for your population that you're working with, okay? So here's a very common issue that we want to address. There's 100 things we could talk about today, but this is a major one. I'm sure you guys see it all the time, called valgus tendency, also known as valgus collapse, knee displacement, knee caving. The reason this happens, your hips adduct and internally rotate at the same time, and it's usually is in a hip flex position. So you might not see it until you get the hips flexed. So this usually leads to knee pain, ACL tears, and IT band syndrome. So we want to try to get rid of this. Definitely more common in females, typically due to having wider hips and diminished hip strength, okay? Definitely happens a lot in males as well, especially individuals that are extremely long, like let's say basketball players, and maybe not have a lot of muscle tissue on them. So what happens is their knees might cave in a little bit more just because of their genetics and hip imbalances. So we want to fix those over time. So this occurs from weak imbalanced hips, inadequate BMO strength, weak hamstrings, tight ankles, poor mechanical learning are the major issues you're going to look at, okay? So how to address this? So you want to determine, is it hip imbalance, ankle mobility, or coordination? It's going to be one of the three. Coordination, this can happen as far as the corrections go with any of these issues. It could be a few days to months, okay? It really depends on the person. When it comes to coordination, it's just simply teaching them the movement and mechanical learning, okay? Because a lot of times they don't know what it looks like or feels like to do a proper squat. So sometimes it's just teaching them how to do it. And then after, with practice, they should be able to do it with no issues, okay? Perfect training spot for this would be teaching a TRX squat. One, they have the safety and they don't feel like they're going to fall backwards. Also, it's a safe way to teach them hip hinge and also what it feels like to actually sit in their hips. Ankle mobility test. So to find out if it's ankle mobility, take a loaded box squat, okay? If they can box squat properly, but the knees cave in a full squat with that load, typically means it's an ankle mobility issue, okay? You'll also see this if the foot heavily pronates during a full squat. So those are the two areas to look for if it's ankle mobility. Easy ways to fix it, start working on calf stretches and ankle mobility drills. So an example of ankle mobility would be the half knee ankle dorsiflexion stretch, and you can look that up online. Other signs of ankle mobility issues, you'll probably have a rounded back and rise up on the balls of the feet, okay? You guys probably see that a lot, so watch for those. A great ankle mobility tool for you guys to use with their clients is elevate their heels. Put the heels, puts a couple plates underneath their heels, and you'll be surprised how much more of a better position they get in, and also deeper in a safer position. So try to use this with their clients. If you have bad ankle mobility with your clients, use this and they're going to think you're magic. It's awesome. So how to address it when it comes to hip imbalance? Typically you're going to have, when you see this, it's strong adductors compared to weak abductors. So think weak glutes, okay? We want to test load squat. Also for advanced athletes, we want to do it single leg. Okay, now here's why we load it. The reason why we load it is because sometimes people, when they learn squat and they do it fine, it might not be finding the issue. Because once they hit a load, then you start seeing valgus tendency. So the people that can squat properly, make sure you test with a load, because then you'll probably start seeing some issues go wrong, and then we can start correcting it, okay? For an advanced athlete, they might be able to do a bilateral squat with weight just fine, but once they go single leg, their knees go everywhere. Okay, so that's why an advanced athlete, you might want to test it for single leg pistol squat and see how the knees work. That'll be another way to test that for an advanced person. Corrective exercises. Mini band squats are great, front of the knees. Okay, we're getting in that deep squat position, and we got resistance to strengthen the areas. Another one is band or X-band side steps. A lot of people do this standing up. When it comes to valgus tendency, it's actually better to do it in a crouched position. The reason for this is valgus tendency actually happens when your hips are in that flexed position, okay? So correcting it standing up might not be the best case scenario. You actually want to do it in that crouch position. So this image here kind of helps you visualize that. Also glute activation. We want to start addressing that. And if we have tight IT bands, possibly foam roll lows. Okay. So let's have a quick quiz here that can get you guys out of here. Go ahead and put your mics back on. Why is squat so important?
Functional.
It's in life.
Yeah, all those were great. Yep, fun. Great functional movement. Great point of intervention for you guys for a screening process. Name benefits of squatting properly.
Vibration or something.
Less stress.
Bone density.
Yeah, bone density. Let's name another one.
Less stress.
Core strengthening.
Yeah, correct. Functional movement, bone density, stronger core performance. What human genetics cause a more upright position when squatting?
Shorter
Shorter
time.
Yeah, shorter
toilet.
So what?
Or so.
Yeah, correct. Yep. So it's always going to be femur to torso ratios, right? What can cause valgus tendency in squat?
Weak hamstrings.
Sure.
Ankle mobility.
Yep. Tight ankles. Yeah. Great. Awesome. Yep. All those. VMO strength. Nice job. Okay, guys. So I only had 30 minutes with you. Wanted to give you as much info as possible and some common things